My first day as a member of the 501st. It was hot. It was dusty and chaotic. Nothing at all like the simulations we were programmed with by Vector Sigma. Of course, that's pretty much the way it was for all of us, wasn't it? All that breeding and solar cycles of training. It doesn't really prepare you for all the screaming or the energon spill, does it? Frankly, I'm still amazed we ever made it through the first hour. Never mind the first day. Incredibly, the 501st survived the crucible of the Sea of Rust, emerging battle-hardened and ready for whatever our alien oppressors, the Quintessons, would throw at us Cybertronians. In the waning months of the Quintesson Wars, the 501st faced missions critical to the agenda of Megatron, leader of the Decepticons. When we arrived at the bombed-out ruins of Rodion, our Autobot commander believed that we had been sent to disable a droid factory that the Quintessons had reactivated to replenish their ranks. What Ultra Magnus did not know, however, was that our unit of the 501st was really after an experimental power source that the Decepticon leader wanted for his orbital base. Keeping Magnus in the dark wasn't easy. The Autobots and Decepticons had high tensions between them in spite of our temporary truce. Many Autobots were becoming increasingly wary of the doings of the former Cybertronian High Guard, and were on the hunt for even the slightest hint of treachery. Just like the rest of them, though, he never caught whiff of what was really going on, until it was far too late. The success of the mission in Rodion was something of a revelation for the warriors of the 501st. Suddenly, we realized that both Autobots and Decepticons could be fooled. And if they could be fooled, they could be killed. As the Quintesson Wars progressed, more and more ground-based legions were pressed into aerial and space combat, including the fighting forces of the 501st. For months, those of us with ground-based alternate modes spent every moment of our downtime in the simulator, preparing for the day we'd be able to join our aerial bot and seeker brothers from the cockpit of a Vanguard or Reaper starfighter. Finally, the day came for us to earn our wings. The Quintessons had staged a daring kidnap of a young city speaker from Cavernous called Windblade, and were being escorted from Cybertron by a fleet of their techno-organic ships. With many of our veteran pilots on planet, most of the 501st were pressed to hold off the aliens and buy time for a pair of Jedi Knights to rescue their Padawan. Once we disabled the final Quintesson flagship, Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker took advantage of the distraction we made and rescued Windblade. Took all the credit, too. It's been said that the 501st got the best of the war. We also got the worst. On the colony planet of Antilla, the Quintessons dug their tentacles and serpent wings into the muck of that spark-forsaken hellhole and dared Cybertron to come after them. So we did, only to be met with month after month of cosmic rust and other mesh-eating diseases, scraplets and other shrieking nocturnal predators, and other sights that still haunt me to this day. Cut off and, for all we knew, abandoned by our superiors, our only hope was Ahsoka Tano, our Jedi commander. Without her iron will or spark of optimism, none of us would have gotten out of there with our sanity or our lives. When her death came, I hope it was quick. She'd earned that much. When the 501st finally drove the Quintessons off of Antilla and were rotated off the planet, Ahsoka Tano made a point of seeing us off personally, calling us the bravest soldiers she had ever seen. It's a good thing many of us were built with visors and faceplates, because none of us could bear to look her in the optics. When the Quintesson invasion of Eucharis caught Cybertron flat-footed, A detachment of aerial bots in the 501st was sent out to stop the bleeding until reinforcements could arrive. It was a textbook suicide mission and we knew it. As we arrived to meet their orbital defenses in space combat, most of us believed that the only way we'd be getting off this planet was in a body bag. Once we finally broke through the Quintesson's blockade over Eucharis's atmosphere, I took a good long look over the battle that raged up above the jungle planet and wondered why so many had to die for a bunch of robotic beasts. Then I followed my orders and turned planetward. When we arrived on the surface of Eucharis, things were just as bad as we had feared. The Quintessons and their droids had us outgunned, outmaneuvered, and outmanned by a 5-to-1 margin. What none of us had counted on was the Maximals. We'd all heard the stories, of course, but none of us had ever seen them in action before, never seen them rip apart a droid with their bare hands, and never seen them wipe out an entire legion of grunts with little to no effort. They were incredible. Even so, it was still a suicide mission. At least it was until Master Yoda arrived with the Dinobots. Then it became a battle. A winnable battle. With the timely arrival of Master Yoda and Grimlock's Dinobots, we were finally able to drive the Quintessons off the Maximal's homeworld. We left as heroes. Many cycles later, we'd return as conquerors. In our circuits, we knew the war was almost over. The galaxy held its breath, waiting to see which side would make the final daring move. As fortune would have it, Cybertron moved first. When Decepticon Communications Chief Soundwave intercepted a transmission detailing that Quintesson General Grievous and many other commanders were hiding in the city of Voss, Optimus Prime gathered an army large enough to conquer 3 city-states. When the orders reached the 501st, our morale soared. For better or worse, this would be the beginning of the end. With the death of General Grievous at the hands of Optimus Prime, the raid on Voss had finally broken the back of our alien oppressors. Under normal circumstances, this would have been a time for celebration, but our next orders put pain to those thoughts. What I remember about the rise of the Decepticon Empire is how quiet it was. During the waning hours of the Quintesson Wars, the Decepticon loyalists in the 501st Legion were discreetly transferred back to the city of Iacon. It was a silent trip. We all knew what was about to happen, what we were about to do. Did we have any doubts? Any private traitorous thoughts? Perhaps, but no one said a word. Not on the journey to Iacon, not when Megatron's orders came through, and not when we marched into the Temple of the Primes. Not a word.
Decepticon intruders! Sound the alarm!
Systems failing. Corruption total.
Yes. Yes! The Autobots' most powerful weapon and the key to the core of Cybertron are mine! The universe shall hear my name and tremble!
With the fall of Iacon and the elimination of many traitorous Autobots and Jedi, including the defeats of Ultra Magnus and Omega Supreme, Megatron's rise to power was complete. In recognition of our service and loyalty to the Decepticon cause, the 501st Loyalists were placed under the direct command of the brutish Decepticon enforcer named Tarn. Armed with deadly new weapons, blazing new ships, and shiny new alternate modes, our presence let all of Cybertron know that the days of the Primes were well and truly over. We were establishing a new era, an era of order and peace. During the rise of the Decepticon Empire, the Autobot colony world of Nebulos began to establish itself as a major irritant. After many Nebulan representatives were sent home in various forms of dismemberment, her newly elected queen broke off diplomatic ties with Cybertron's new rulers and began exploring military options. Many of the Autobots that were on Nebulos had developed a brand new headmaster technology, and they were just about ready to give it a field test for any Decepticon or Quintesson forces. Clearly, it was time for a regime change. A change that would be effected by the 501st Loyalists, now under the direct command of Tarn. Our orders were simple: infiltrate the planet and squash their Minicon-sized leader. This, to Lord Megatron, would send a clear message to any other colony worlds that would otherwise become major troublemakers during our civil war. With the Queen and thousands more of her like-minded organics on the planet eliminated, Nebulos quickly fell in line. It was the first time the 501st Decepticon Loyalists were called out to adjust a colony planet's government, but it would not be the last. Within months, we had gained a well-deserved reputation and were renamed to the Decepticon Justice Division. Although the Quintesson Wars were over, some just never seemed to get the message. The worst case was Decius, a Quintesson judge who had somehow escaped judgment for all the energon they stole from Cybertron. Lord Megatron tracked the five-faced freak to the molten colony planet of Char and sent out the DJD to finish the job. It seemed like a simple enough mission, but when we saw the fleet of techno-organic ships hovering over the planet, we suddenly realized that Decius's denial mechanisms were a little more dangerous than we had imagined. The slight whiff of nostalgia we had mere megacycles after the death of General Grievous to end the Quintesson Wars had already grown sour as we fought off the alien and his droid armies in the sky and established our own orbital positions. Now it was time to find out what this was all about. By the time we had finally made it to the molten surface of Char, it was apparent that Decius had been a busy little xenomorph. All by his lonesome, he had found a previously hidden droid factory, fired it up, and cranked out his own personal army of bodyguards and battle droids. Needless to say, this got many of us Cybertronians a little bit hot under the brain module, and not just because of all that lava and plasma. Truth be told, we'd all had our fill of these gearheads and aliens during the official war, and we couldn't stomach the thought of going through another one when we still had traitorous Autobots to hunt down and destroy. And so we blew them up. Blew up the droids, blew up the factory, damn near blew up the entire planet. The destruction of the last Quintesson and his mining facility on Char destroyed any and all thoughts of a second attempt on our homeworld and colonies. For the first time in a while, we could finally sit back and relax after bringing about their complete extinction and get back to the business of maintaining and conquering Cybertron for the Decepticons, rather than building an empire from scratch. Officially, There never was a rebellion or outbreak of war on the speed planet of Velocitron. Unofficially, however, approximately 20 solar cycles after the Quintesson Wars began, a special detachment of the DJD was sent out to Velocitron with orders to eradicate several of our traitorous clone brothers and Autobots that had escaped after Ultra Magnus had been conquered in Iacon. Leading the charge against us was the colony planet's fastest racer, Override, and she had bred many of the soldiers to take arms against the Empire. Joining us on the mission was an expert on the inner workings of Velocitron and other colony worlds, a bounty hunter with a hook for a hand, named Lockdown. The bounty hunter left after the battle ended and we returned to Cybertron. He said something about some data that he had smuggled regarding the whereabouts of the Allspark, and gave it to us as a token of appreciation for Megatron's tenacity. After the uprising on Velocitron, Lord Megatron determined that all contact with our colony worlds needed to be cut off completely. His reasoning was that more potential soldiers would come through space bridges and be too susceptible to corruption from the Autobots and their lies. All the space bridges we had during the Golden Age would be destroyed on the surface of Cybertron and its moons. Future troopers would be built and experimented on in the gladiator arenas of our capital city of Kaon by our mad scientist and most logical mind, Shockwave. Though the DJD itself remained pure, the Decepticon army gradually became more and more diverse, from combiners like Bruticus and Devastator to triple changers like Astrotrain and Blitzwing. Needless to say, we clones never got used to the new guys. When it was finally completed, the orbital cannon on the Trypticon space station became Lord Megatron's new favorite toy. It was also the most boring assignment for a Decepticon soldier. Tedious inspection drills, multiple maintenance reports. Things got so bad that when a prison break erupted in Kaon and we were called to help with reinforcements, we were almost happy to have somebody shooting at us again. If only we'd known what an embarrassing snipe storm we were getting ourselves into, we probably would have jettisoned the entire detention block into Cybertron's core. After the embarrassment of the prison break, Tarn removed us in the DJD from our comfortable belay and began moving us around the entire planet in a bid to find the now missing Alpha Trion protocols. Ironically, our punishment proved to be our salvation. The poor saps that took our place on board Trypticon were crushed and destroyed when he fell out of orbit and crashed onto our planet's surface. By the time of the raid of Crystal City, many of the DJD were getting sick of this so-called resistance from the Autobots. In the past, we'd secretly enjoyed putting down a local insurrection or two. They kept the troops sharp and the Empire feared. But many of these Autobots were different. They were more organized than when we were allied against the Quintessons, and their movement was spreading like a virus across the civilians in Cybertronian cities. So much so that rebels were everywhere we went. The raid was a perfect example of how much things were starting to fall apart. We were supposed to go in, wipe out a few insurgents, and retrieve some stolen protocols on an encrypted golden disk. Before we knew it, we were nearly overrun by Autobot forces, bug-like creatures, and crystal guardians, with the disk nowhere to be found. Even though the Crystal City raid was only a partial success, we now had an entirely new sub-faction of warriors in the Insecticons, which suited Lord Megatron just fine. When Trypticon crash-landed on the ruins of Iacon, about half of the DJD's clone forces were crushed under his sheer weight. Of those that made it out of the crash site, another third were killed by flying debris. I'd fought alongside some of those bots for over 30 solar cycles. Afterwards, all but 5 of us in the DJD were cut off from Tarn's roster as we hooked up with a battalion of Seekers led by Starscream to destroy several evacuating Autobot vessels. It wasn't the best thought-out plan, but we were battered, tired, and operating only on instinct. If it hadn't been for our training, we probably would never have gotten past their defenses on Cybertron's moons. And so the battle over the Autobot moon bases came to an end. I'm told we destroyed dozens of Autobot ships that day. Even if it had been hundreds, it would never have made up for those on Trypticon. After Trypticon's fall, Soundwave decrypted the data that Lockdown had given us from the mission at Velocitron, and we soon learned that the Golden Disc with the Alpha Trion protocols had found its way into the hands of a young Autobot scout named B-127. We weren't surprised. For all his talk about his nickname being Badassatron, he was more of a bothersome Bumblebee who had been thumbing his nose at all of the Decepticons, and had taken on more of a messenger role since the fall of Iacon. After we bombed out the Autobot outpost Tiger Pax, we began looking for the Golden Disc, executed several throttle bots, and awaited Lord Megatron's arrival. After Megatron arrived and took custody of B-127 over the bombed-out Autobot stronghold, we figured it was only a matter of time before he coughed up the location of the Allspark, which the Alpha Trion protocols contained. Many of us had been either unwilling participants or witnesses to the Decepticon leader's manners of persuasion in the past. The thought of Optimus Prime's loyal scout having his voice box crushed by our leader's hand before being handed off to Shockwave to be tortured and experimented on was inconceivable. As a result, many of us who chose to defect to the Autobots were swiftly and promptly hunted down and executed. While I hated the idea of destroying my own brothers for the sake of the war, I understood that good soldiers always follow orders. Through the information we gathered from B-127's mind from a cortical psychic patch, we discovered that the Allspark lay in the Decepticon stronghold of Helix and was the key to keeping Cybertron alive while the planet's core was repairing itself. By the time we arrived, however, it was too late. Optimus Prime launched the Allspark through a space bridge to keep it out of Megatron's hands before destroying said space bridge. Whatever initial shock we felt was quickly replaced with anger as we joined the ensuing firefight. For cycles, we had treated the Autobots like disobedient and rebellious children, only to be repaid for our tolerance with treachery on an unimaginable scale. Quite frankly, much like the fight over Cybertron's moon bases, I don't remember much of the battle. I guess we won. After the battle, the remaining members of the Imperial 501st finally caught their breath. We had taken the Autobot Resistance's best shot and had come up standing. Now, with every one of those cowards preparing to mass evacuate the planet to find new homes with Energon, it was our turn to strike. Nobody complained about the acid rain at Coquillar. We never felt it. Even though we were blinded by monsoons, we could see the end of the Autobot Resistance in our blaster sights. Was it only a mirage, perhaps? But on that day in that city, our Energon boiled with dreams of victory, drying the ground that stood in our way.
I am the Dominator! I am the Destroyer! I am Megatron! Autobots, fall back!
As the Autobots fled, many of us gathered around a burning bunker and let out a cheer that shook the entire planet. The Autobot resistance was done. Their final hope, called the Ark, was being shot down one warp cannon at a time. Shockwave was researching a tower he had found at the Sea of Rust, with hopes of destroying the remaining Autobots fleeing to Iacon and restoring our home. Order had finally returned to Cybertron, in no small part due to the efforts of the courageous warriors of the 501st.